Okay, it is 2 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I want to do something a little bit different than I usually do. So lately, I've been interviewing people about their experiences with the patches, but recently, my husband gave me a book, which is very unlike him. He usually does not give me books to read. I like to pick out my own books. But I was very excited about the book that he chose for me because it's an author that I really love, Joe Dispenza. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with Joe Dispenza. It's a book I would not have picked out for myself because I have read his book, Becoming Supernatural, and it is a fabulous book filled with fantastic information. In fact, it helped me manifest $5,000, and I'll tell you the story someday about that, but not at this particular get together. But the book that he bought me was written years before he wrote that book. It's called You Are the Placebo. And I thought, well, that's just going to be really old information since I've already read Becoming Supernatural. But since he already gave it to me, I thought, well, I might as well read it. And there is a lot of really good information in this book. I really have been enjoying it. But at the same time, I was a little bit discouraged at the same time because we are so far from where we need to be with medicine. There is so much that we can do with the power of our own mind, the power of our own thoughts that we really should be doing. We should be healing ourselves. And then I realized, Cads, with this information, with knowing that we can heal, why do we even need the patches? And then it suddenly dawned on me, with this information, I don't have a belief strong enough that I can heal genetic disorders with my mind or really heal a lot of my past beliefs my core beliefs that are so ingrained in me. But I do believe in the patches, and using the information from this book and combining that with the patches, I should be able to really maximize the use of the patches and use them as a crutch because it's something I do believe in. And so I figured, this is a perfect opportunity to help others understand exactly what our potential is and what the potential of these patches could be too, if we understand how to utilize the power of the placebo. So I want to start with telling some of the stories from this book. This is how we best learn, through stories. So back in the early 1970s, Sam Lond was having a lot of difficulty swallowing. He went to the doctor and was diagnosed with esophageal cancer. And this had actually spread to his stomach. And at that time, they really didn't have good treatments. And this was a death sentence. They told him, hey, if you get surgery, we might be able to extend your life a little bit longer. This is something you might want to do. So he did go ahead and have the surgery done. So he had some of the cancer removed from his esophagus and some from the stomach. And they did a scan afterwards and found that there was actually cancer, extensive cancer in his liver. They told him that he probably only had a few short months, and he decided to take his wife and move to Nashville where she could be closer to her family and have support. So he moved. And it was there that he met up with Dr. Clifton Meter while he was in the hospital. He'd been in the hospital for a few days, and he looked like this shriveled up man. He was very despondent, just curled up, feeling very hopeless and just looking like death itself. After he got to know Dr. Meter, they kind of developed a rapport, and he shared his life experience with him and let him know that he had married his soulmate, his true soulmate. They loved boating together, and they went and bought some land after he retired near this man-made lake where they could boat as much as they wanted, but the dam broke. And there was a flood that came through, and it took everything away from him, including his wife, and they never found her body. Within 6 months, he was diagnosed with this esophageal cancer. There was a very kind lady that he met who agreed to take care of him, marry him and take care of him until he passed on. And this nice lady, he really appreciated her and her kindness and her family's kindness. And Dr. Meter listened to this story and he thought, well, what is it I can do for you? He asked him, what can I do for you, Mr. Lond, to help you? And Mr. Lond thought about it and he thought, I really want to make it through Christmas. You know, my wife's family has been so wonderful for me. I really want to give this to them and have a nice Christmas with them and not ruin it by dying. And if you can help me survive till then, I'll just be really happy. So they worked on it. He came up with a plan to help him with good nutrition and medications the best that he could. And Mr. Lond was really doing well. He left the hospital late in October and he seemed to be thriving. He was looking great. He went home, they had Christmas, and exactly a week after Christmas, so New Year's Day, his wife brought him back to the hospital because he just wasn't doing well. And Dr. Meter was just shocked because everything was looking really well. But within 24 hours, he died. Now, he did have a little bit of a pneumonia, but it didn't seem like that was what should have taken him out. Well, they did an autopsy. And oddly, what they found was there was a little bit of liver cancer, just a small patch of cancer in the left area of his liver, and a small patch of cancer that was in his lung. And a very mild pneumonia. There was no reason why he should have died. So another story. In 1957, there was a UCLA psychologist, Bruno Klepfer, who published in a peer-reviewed journal about a man who had advanced lymphoma. It was so advanced that there were tumors the size of oranges on his neck, in his armpits, and in his groin area. He was not doing very well. He was febrile and he was gasping for air. He actually heard about a new drug, Krebiosin. And he'd heard wonderful things about it, that it was in experimental trials. And he talked to his doctor, Dr. West, begging, hey, please let me into this trial. I really want to try this medication. Well, unfortunately, the only people that were allowed in the trial were people that had life expectancy of at least 3 months to live, and he did not have that much time. But Dr. West was able to get a hold of some medication for him. He injected them on a Friday. He came back on Monday, and the tumors were half the size. As Dr. West said, he said that the tumors were just melting like snowballs on a hot stove. He improved dramatically. After 2 months, he heard something in the media that Krebiosin was just a dud. And the tumors started growing back dramatically. It was at that point that Dr. West realized, it could be the placebo effect that is causing this man to heal. It could be the power of his own mind. So he told the patient that the batch that he got wasn't any good, but there's this new upgraded version of Krebiosin and he has it and he was going to inject it to him. And he injected him with distilled water. Again, the tumors dissolved and he went home. He did great and he was tumor free for 2 months. And then he heard something on the media that Krebiosin was actually just mineral water and an amino acid. There was actually nothing to it. In fact, the manufacturers were being indicted for it. He immediately declined and died 2 days later. So this is the power of the mind. And in fact, there was an orthopedic surgeon, Bruce Moseley, in 1996, who took he had volunteers. These were all military men who had severe osteoarthritis in their knees. And at the time, well, and still today, a lot of times we'll do an arthroscope procedure where you go in with a scope. The surgeon cuts away at the damaged cartilage, believing that that's causing the problem. You lavage it, you wash it away, and then you sew the knee back up. This is all done under general anesthesia. So with the 10 men, he took 2 of the men and gave them actual surgery. He decided 3 of the men would get just a lavage, just the washing, just the rinsing. And 5 of the men would just get an open incision, and then they would close it back up and do no actual surgery at all. The doctor did not know which patients would be actually getting the real surgery and which ones would be getting the fake surgery. He didn't know until he went into the OR, the operating room, and he would open up an envelope which would tell him which category the patient was in. Immediately after surgery, all of the men had improvements. And 6 months later, they all did great. They were no longer limping, no longer using walkers, whether they had the actual surgery or not. So in the 1950s, they were doing a certain procedure called an internal mammary ligation when somebody was having a lot of chest pain due to angina. They didn't have coronary artery bypass graft surgeries back then. What they would do is they would open you up, tie off the troubling artery that was creating the issue, in the hope that the person would then grow new arteries to feed the heart. It would stimulate that new growth. What was really interesting about this particular experiment, there were 2 groups between Kansas City and Seattle, and half of them got the actual surgery and half of them got a sham surgery where they just put them under general anesthesia. They opened up, looked at the arteries, and then closed them back up. 67% of the people who had the actual surgery had less pain and needed less medication. 83% that got the sham surgery had improvements, no longer needed as much pain medication and nitroglycerin, and had improvements in their pain. So that is amazing that our minds are that powerful. Parkinson's. This is a gradual degeneration of nerve cells in the midbrain, the basal ganglia area, which is because there's a decrease. Our brains aren't producing enough of a particular neurotransmitter called dopamine. So the University of British Columbia in Vancouver informed a group of Parkinson's patients that they would be getting a medication that would significantly improve their symptoms. So their symptoms are rigidity, they no longer have control over their motor movements, difficulty with speech. So half of them, well, actually all of them, were just given saline injection. Nobody actually got any medication. And yet half of them had major improvements. And so the people that were doing the research thought, well, what's behind this? What's actually going on? And they did brain scans of them and found that those that responded, those that were having all these improvements in their motor skills, really did have improvements of their dopamine levels. In fact, they had an improvement of 200% higher dopamine levels in their basal ganglia. So it really worked dramatically. The placebo is something that we always try to control for whenever we do experiments on a new drug, because we know that the mind is so powerful. And it's baffling to me. It's like, why aren't we trying to harness this power? Why aren't we trying to learn more and understand how we can utilize that? But antidepressants, for example, as the years have gone by, we've developed stronger and stronger medications, but the response to the placebo has become stronger and stronger as well. And the theory behind that is as people, you have these desperate people who have tried all kinds of medications and have lost all kinds of hope. But now there's something new, and new is usually better, more modern technology. This is going to be the thing that really works for them, right? And as these people try this medication thinking they are actually getting medication and they're actually in the control group, they have such hope that they have a fantastic response because they believe that they are getting the latest, greatest, newest technology. So it's even harder to control for the placebo as time has gone on. But there's also something called the nocebo. So the placebo effect is when we have such a belief that we actually exceed the expectations of what really should be happening. The nocebo is when we have a negative belief that negatively affects things far more than what should be expected. And a great example of that is in 1938, there was a 60-year-old man living in Tennessee, and for 4 months, he had been getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And his wife finally took him to the hospital where they sought help. There was Dr. Drayton Doherty, who was on the case, and noticed that this man was refusing to eat. He was just losing weight and just dying in front of everybody's eyes. They put a feeding tube down him, and as soon as they would give him a feeding tube, he would immediately vomit. Well, his wife pulled the doctor aside and confessed that her husband had been voodooed. He apparently had gotten into a disagreement with the local voodoo priest there, and the voodoo priest summoned him to meet him at the cemetery in the middle of the night. He went to the cemetery, and the voodoo priest waved some sort of malodorous liquid in front of his face and told him that he was going to die. He was going to be getting very sick very soon. He was going to die, and there was nothing anybody could do about it. Well, Dr. Doherty was very clever, and he decided, okay, knowing this information, I know exactly what to do. So he concocted this story and went in and told the family that he had talked with the voodoo priest. He had tricked him into meeting him in the middle of the night in the cemetery. He tried to find out exactly what the voodoo priest had done to him to voodoo him. And initially, the voodoo priest was very reluctant, but he roughed him up and put him against a tree and was choking him. And the voodoo priest finally gave in and told him what had happened. He had rubbed some sort of lizard eggs onto his skin. Some of these went inside of him. Some of them, the lizard eggs hatched. Most of them died, but one had actually made it into his stomach and was growing inside his stomach and was eating him alive from the inside out. And the doctor explained to him that he knew exactly the treatment and knew what to do and told the nurse to come here. The nurse dutifully came and handed him the syringe. And the doctor injected him with an emetic, so something that causes you to vomit. He injected him with it and walked out of the room confidently. The family was all dismayed, wondering what's going on. And soon this man just starts vomiting and vomiting and vomiting. And after Dr. Doherty felt like there was enough time that had passed, he goes back into the room. He pulls out of his black bag and just kind of palms this lizard in his hand and waits for him to vomit again. And as soon as he vomits into the basin, he drops the green lizard in there without anybody seeing what he's done. And he looks, there it is, there's the lizard. And the family looks in amaze. The man looks in amaze. This came out of him. He says, you're cured now. The lizard is gone. You should be fine. The man goes into this deep sleep for the next 12 hours. And as soon as he wakes up, he can eat and drink again and everything is just fine. That is the power of the mind. And so you can see how there are some people who have such a strong disbelief in these patches that these patches don't work for them. And yet there are others that do have a belief and are allowing it to work for them. And I know that there's something to these patches because people are having all kinds of experiences that they weren't even expecting to have, such as my friend who had lost her sense of taste and smell and never expected that to come back. But within wearing the patches for 3 months, she developed her sense of taste and smell again, which is amazing. That's not something you would expect. But the patches really do work. And if we allow ourselves to believe in them, we can not only have these effects from the patches, but we can even help guide the patches into how we want the healing to happen. So for those of you who don't know that much about the LifeWave patches, the LifeWave patches are filled with organic nanocrystals. And as our body's light, so our body is constantly emitting light in the form of infrared light that you can see with night vision goggles. As our light hits the patch, it gets infused with a certain energy and goes back into our body, signaling our body to do different things. And in the case of the X39, our star patch, it's telling our body to produce more copper peptide. And in response to the increase in copper peptide, that then triggers our stem cells to become active, more productive. And stem cells can do whatever we're needing them to do. Stem cells can become heart cells. They can become skin cells. They can become whatever cells are needed at the time. So they can really help us with a lot of healing. And these decline as we age. So anything that we can do to help improve our stem cells can help us with our healing. It's a form of frequency medicine. And to understand frequency medicine, the sunlight is a good example of how that works. And Albert Einstein in his day said that frequency medicine was going to be the medicine of the future. And I believe it is. And even the placebo effect is actually frequency medicine. And we'll get more into that as this series goes on, explaining how that works. But when you go out into the sunlight, the sun hits your skin and tells your body with a certain frequency, hey, it's time to start producing vitamin D. The sun isn't giving us vitamin D. The sun is giving us a signal, a specific frequency that we are evolutionary designed to respond to, telling us to start producing vitamin D. And it is that frequency that is the same type of thing that is telling our body, hey, time to produce more copper peptide. And in response, we need to increase our stem cell production. So that is a little explanation of the patch and just a little hint of how the placebo and nocebo have such a powerful effect in our body. Next week, I'm going to be going into a little bit more detail on the biology of how the placebo is working in our brain and what we can do to help access it. I'm planning on this being a weekly series of information to help us understand how we can really utilize these, maximize the patches to their fullest extent. And if anybody is interested in reading this book, You Are the Placebo by Joe Dispenza, it is really worth reading. It's a lot of great information. I want to thank you all for joining me, and please subscribe to the channel and keep posted for regular weekly information. Thank you all, and I'm going to say farewell to you today. Bye-bye.